The dining room glowed with warm amber light, the chandelier catching reflections in every wine glass raised around the long oak table. The carved turkey steamed in the center, flanked by Naomi Carter's brown butter yams, sage stuffing, and cornbread muffins so soft they crumbled if you looked at them wrong. Laughter bounced off the paneled walls while low jazz hummed from the speaker in the kitchen. Every chair was filled. Her parents, her sister, Brandon's brother, their kids, plates passed, memories rehashed. It was Thanksgiving the way Naomi had always orchestrated it. All right, someone chuckled mid-toast, wobbling their glass. To Naomi, for pulling off another flawless dinner. Brandon stood. He laughed too, the kind of laugh people lean into. Actually, he said, his voice louder than necessary, if I could say something. Naomi looked up from slicing the pecan pie, napkin still tucked into her lap. She smiled automatically. Go ahead, baby. He tapped his knife against the rim of his glass. Once, twice. The room quieted. Brandon cleared his throat. First, I want to say I'm thankful for all of you. Family matters. Reminds us who we are, who we've been, and... He reached behind his chair. Who we're not anymore. He placed a manila envelope in front of her plate. Not gently, not dramatically, just with the mechanical movement of someone completing a task. Naomi's hands froze over the pie. Her smile faltered. What is this? She asked, blinking. I'm filing for divorce, Brandon said, tone flat as if he were commenting on the weather. Didn't want to ruin the whole night. Figured now's as good a time as any. The room gasped. A fork dropped. A wine glass tapped a plate with a sharp clink. 16-year-old Talia froze mid-bite, eyes flicking up, fork still hovering. Naomi stared at the envelope, then at Brandon, searching his face for some kind of smirk, some wink, some sign this was a twisted joke, but he didn't blink, didn't even look ashamed. She picked up the envelope. The seal had already been broken. I didn't want to blindside you, Brandon added, as if that changed anything. Just read it when you get a chance. Naomi didn't move. She didn't speak. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. The heading glared back at her. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed by Brandon M. Carter. Date of separation, October 5th. She whispered, I don't understand. Brandon reached out, touched her shoulder in the most condescending gesture imaginable. We'll talk later, he said, patronizing and dismissive all at once. She recoiled like his hand had burned her. Her father stood. Brandon, are you out of your mind? But Brandon was already seated again, sipping his wine like the matter was settled. Better now than at Christmas, he said. Naomi stood, her chair scraping loudly. She looked around the table. Her sister's eyes were wide. Her mother's hands trembled on her napkin. Even Talia wouldn't meet her gaze. For the first time in years, Naomi had no idea what role she was supposed to play. It had always been clear. She was the one who made everything run, who re-ironed tablecloths if the corners curled, who color-coded the fridge drawers, who labeled the medicine cabinet. For 18 years, she poured herself into this house, this family. The birthdays themed down to the napkins, the homemade school lunches with handwritten notes, the holiday cards mailed before Thanksgiving every single year. She wasn't just a homemaker, she was the architect of stability. Before Talia was born, Naomi had worked as an assistant designer for a boutique interior firm in Austin. She gave up that career without hesitation when their daughter came along. She poured her creativity into their own home, into a breakfast nook that became Talia's study den, into backyard herb gardens and chalkboard pantry labels. Brandon used to love it. He used to call her the woman with the magic touch. He used to brag. Lately, she'd picked her work back up again. Freelancing, curating an Instagram page, even had her first real client in years. Then 2 more, then 5, and a soft launch of her own site scheduled for Black Friday. She had planned to tell the family over dessert. "I'm finally doing it. I'm going full time." Instead, her entire life detonated over cornbread and cranberry sauce. Looking back, she could see the signs, the extra hours at the office, the vague weekend conferences, the new passwords on the accounts, the way he turned away when she touched him, the emotionless intimacy, the locked garage door, the phone he always kept face down. But she told herself she was imagining things, that maybe once she brought in money again, he'd see her differently. Maybe they'd reconnect. Maybe he'd remember why he fell in love with her. But Brandon had already made his decision. He had filed weeks ago, had the documents sealed and prepped, and chose to serve her in front of her family, in front of their daughter, at her own table, using her own dishes. It wasn't a spontaneous mistake. It was a deliberate humiliation. Later that night, after everyone left in a blur of stunned hugs and awkward silences, she stood alone in the kitchen, sponge in hand, water running hot. The envelope sat on the counter, reopened but unread. In the living room, she heard the soft drone of ESPN. Brandon had changed into sweatpants. He was sipping bourbon like nothing had happened. Naomi turned off the faucet. The silence pressed in. She stared through the kitchen window into the dark backyard. The chairs on the patio rocked in the wind. The air smelled like cloves and endings. That was the first moment the question crept in. Not why, not how, but something far more terrifying. Who am I when I'm no longer needed? The next morning, the kitchen was still. Not quiet like peace, quiet like absence. Naomi sat at the counter, laptop open, divorce papers beside her like a stack of explosives. She checked their joint bank account. It showed $1,436. She blinked, refreshed. Still there, no glitch. She opened the transaction history. Her stomach dropped. Dozens of transfers, all to an account she didn't recognize, large amounts, starting in late September. She clicked the mortgage site. The password didn't work. She tried the backup. Nothing. Her hands began to shake. She called the bank. A cheery woman answered after 5 minutes on hold. "Hi, I'm trying to verify the mortgage status for the home on 721 Layton Drive," Naomi said. "Name on the account?" "Naomi Carter," or "Brandon Carter." There was a pause. Then the rep said, "I'm only seeing Brandon Carter listed. Sole borrower, no co-owner." Naomi's mouth went dry. She ended the call. She hadn't signed anything. At least, she thought she hadn't. She sat down hard on the tile floor. Her knees buckled. Her mind raced. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. 19 years of unpaid labor, every school drop-off, every sick day, every volunteer form signed. She had invested everything, and he had stripped her bare in one move. A few hours later, Talia came downstairs. Naomi looked up slowly. "Did you know?" she asked. Talia hesitated. Her voice cracked. "He said he'd tell you, that he had a plan. He made me promise not to say anything." Naomi's throat tightened. "What else?" she asked. It's Miss Beckett," Talia whispered. My dance coach. Naomi blinked. What about her? He's been seeing her. I saw them. They kissed. She got in his car. I didn't know how to tell you. Naomi's hands gripped the edge of the counter. She felt like she was drowning. She's 28, she whispered. She teaches you. Talia nodded. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to lie. Naomi's chest was hollow. Her voice cracked. You should have told me. I was scared, Talia said. Naomi looked into her daughter's eyes, and something changed. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to throw dishes or yell or fall to pieces. That's what Brandon expected. That's how he'd win. Instead, she reached for a notebook, then her phone. What are you doing? Talia asked. I'm making a record, Naomi said. Every dollar, every lie, every date. I'm going to build a case. Talia hesitated, then stepped forward. I'll help. Naomi turned to her, eyes finally softening. Good, she said. Start by telling me exactly what you saw. She hit record. Naomi played the recording back twice. Talia's voice was soft but clear, her testimony precise, the timestamp unmistakable. She saved it, labeled the file Statement 1, NOV 24. Then she added a passcode to the folder. Her hands moved calmly now, like they belonged to someone who had already died once and come back with a colder heart and a sharper mind. By Sunday morning, the atmosphere in the house had curdled. The air itself seemed wary. Brandon came by to pick up a few things, wearing gym clothes and cologne that didn't belong to their history. He moved through the kitchen like a visitor, not even pretending to explain. Naomi stood quietly at the island, watching him note which items were still his. Talia lingered in the hallway, earbuds in but not playing music, her shoulders curled inward. Brandon glanced at her and said, We'll talk later, sweetheart, and then kissed her forehead with the casual cruelty of someone who still believed he deserved affection. He left without looking back. At 7:42 a.m. the next day, the doorbell rang. Naomi opened it in her robe and slippers. A courier handed her an envelope stamped with the county court seal. He didn't meet her eyes. He didn't need to. She already knew what it was. A formal notice to vacate. 30 days. Signed, filed, delivered. The air bit at her bare neck as the door shut. Her hand trembled on the knob. She stood there for a long time, robe fluttering at the hem, the paper limp in her grasp. Later that afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of legal printouts, bank statements, and open browser tabs. She'd barely eaten. Talia hovered in the doorway with a plate of toast. Mom, she said softly, you have to eat something. Naomi looked up. Her eyes had stopped blinking hours ago. I need help, she said finally, but not from you. Talia nodded. She put the plate down and backed away. Naomi opened the forum thread she'd bookmarked at 2 a.m. the night before. Surviving high-asset divorce. Tips, tricks, and tactical women. She scrolled through dozens of usernames with fake names and real fury. One name came up again and again. Jade Whitman. A former federal prosecutor turned private attorney, specializing in asset tracing, forged signatures, and husbands who underestimated the women they married. Naomi messaged her, then called. The woman picked up on the second ring. Jade Whitman, she said crisply. I heard you're the one they regret hiring too late, Naomi said. Then don't wait, Jade replied. They met 2 days later in a narrow office above a Pilates studio. Jade wore all black, hair in a high bun, eyes like scalpels behind thin gold frames. "Tell me the part he thought you were too stupid to notice," she said, flipping open a folder. Naomi handed over everything: the transfer logs, the mortgage documents, the recording. "He took the house," Naomi said. "But he didn't just take it, he forged my signature. There's a deed transfer dated March of last year. I never signed that." Jade paused, then looked up. "You loop your S like that?" Naomi shook her head. "Not once in my life." "That's forgery," Jade said flatly. "We'll get it certified. That's criminal." Naomi's voice dropped. "Can I win this?" Jade smiled slightly. "He filed first, which gives him narrative control, but that won't matter. He moved funds without consent, forged legal documents, lied about assets, and entered a relationship with your child's teacher. He underestimated you. That's our edge." Naomi blinked. "He called my business a hobby." Jade nodded. "Then let's turn your hobby into his reckoning." They spent the next 3 hours outlining a strategy: forensic accounting, lifestyle audits, asset recovery. Jade explained it all with the detachment of someone who's gutted bigger fish for breakfast. Naomi took notes, listened carefully, internalized every phrase. "Do not let him know you have legal representation," Jade said. "Not yet. Let him think you're frozen." Naomi nodded slowly. "That'll be easy," she said. "He thinks I'm made of soft things." That week, Naomi wore a mask of politeness. When Brandon stopped by to get his golf clubs, she smiled and offered him coffee. When he asked how the kids were adjusting, she said, "They're confused, but we're figuring it out." She logged the time he came, the license plate of the car he drove. She noticed the new watch he wore and how he seemed to linger in Talia's room longer than necessary, talking softly through the door about understanding and fresh starts. Naomi took a screenshot of Melissa's new Instagram post: a wine glass, a patio brunch, a caption that read, "New beginnings." His ring on her hand, the one Naomi had resized for his birthday 10 years ago, glinted clearly in the sunlight. Naomi didn't comment. She just saved the image, dated it, labeled it "Public Confirmation of Infidelity, Nov 28. A few nights later, while digging through the back of the closet for old tax returns, Naomi found the safe. A black fireproof box Brandon rarely opened. She entered the old combination. Inside were insurance documents, a Rolex warranty, and a folder marked Refinance. She opened it. Inside, a notarized form titled Title Adjustment, March 2022. Her signature stared back at her. She stared harder. The first name was perfect, the loop in the Y, the straight line of the I. But the last name, Carter, was wrong. The R didn't curl the way she wrote it. The T crossed at the wrong angle. It was like a ghost trying on her handwriting. Naomi brought the document to Jade. Jade didn't flinch. "This is it," she said. "We'll get a handwriting analyst to confirm. That's a felony. It changes everything." Naomi sat back. Her pulse was steady now. "He thinks I'm quiet," she said. "He thinks I'll fold." Jade looked her in the eye. "Then let's let him keep thinking that, until he's under oath." For the next week, Naomi moved through life like a shadow with purpose. She didn't yell, didn't argue. She packed slowly, deliberately. She made space in drawers that Brandon would never fill again. Talia and her younger brother Eli went to stay with Naomi's sister for a few days. The house felt hollow, but not empty. It felt like a field clearing before a storm. Then the summons arrived. Brandon wanted full control of the house. He offered Naomi a generous monthly allowance and temporary access to a secondary vehicle. Naomi stared at the document. There was a note in Brandon's handwriting on the side. It said, "Let's keep this clean. No need for drama." She laughed, a dry, humorless laugh that echoed off the kitchen walls. He wanted no drama after detonating their marriage in front of her parents. He wanted peace after robbing her of every safety net. He wanted clean after scrubbing her name off every document that mattered. Naomi folded the paper once neatly. Then she added it to the file labeled War. On Friday morning, as the first hearing approached, Naomi sat in her car outside the courthouse. She stared at the building, pale stone against gray sky. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. Her fear had already been spent. What she felt now was colder, more focused, like iron drawn through fire. She checked her reflection. No lipstick, no eyeliner, just her. Clean lines, pulled back curls, a black blazer over a simple blouse. She stepped out of the car. Jade waited by the courthouse door, a folder tucked under one arm. "You ready?" she asked. Naomi nodded. "He picked the wrong woman," she said. "He just doesn't know it yet." Together, they walked into the storm. Brandon Carter entered courtroom 4B like it was another boardroom. His tailored navy suit pressed sharp, his gait slow and practiced, the confident smirk already curled into place like it lived there. Melissa Beckett walked 2 steps behind him in a cream blouse and black slacks, her expression strained into neutrality, though the red on her lips was too loud, too deliberate for a courtroom where truth dressed modestly. They didn't hold hands, but their posture said alliance. They sat together on the left side, flanked by Brandon's attorney, a polished man with salt and pepper hair and a briefcase worth more than Naomi's monthly income. Naomi entered moments later beside Jade Whitman, whose heels clicked like a metronome of precision across the polished floor. Naomi wore black not out of mourning, but to match the tone of war. Her blazer fit like armor. Her curls were slicked back into a low bun. No makeup, no jewelry. She carried only a manila folder and a stare so steady it startled Melissa into looking away. They took their place at the plaintiff's table without ceremony. Naomi didn't glance at Brandon. She didn't need to. She knew his smell, his habits, his panic triggers, and which eye twitched when he was bluffing. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a tight jaw and clear glasses, sat at the bench like she had no time for egos or games. "This is the matter of Carter versus Carter," she said, scanning the docket. "Today's session will address temporary orders regarding property control and spousal relief." Brandon's lawyer stood first, adjusting his cuffs like a man about to deliver a rehearsed TED Talk. "Your Honor, my client has acted with exceptional grace under difficult circumstances," he began, voice smooth. "Despite the breakdown of his marriage, he has continued to provide support to Mrs. Carter, offering her a monthly allowance, transportation, and the continued use of their family home until just recently. Given her lack of employment history and limited financial resources, we believe he has been more than fair. We now request full possession of the property, as well as an expedited path toward asset division that reflects his ongoing responsibilities as the primary earner." Naomi watched the judge nod slightly, noncommittal, then turned to Jade. "Ms. Whitman?" Jade stood slowly, her movements deliberate, her voice calm. "Your Honor, We'll be submitting several exhibits today that illustrate a very different picture of Mr. Carter's so-called fairness. She handed a folder to the bailiff. Exhibit A, she said. Bank records showing a pattern of unauthorized transfers from the couple's joint account into a separate personal account held under the name of Melissa Beckett, Mr. Carter's current romantic partner. Brandon's head swiveled, the smirk evaporating from his face. Melissa blinked rapidly, her lips parting slightly as if to speak, but finding no words. Exhibit B, Jade continued, her tone crisp. A notarized property deed adjustment dated March 2022, removing Mrs. Carter's name from the home title. The signature on that document, Your Honor, is not hers. It has been analyzed by a certified handwriting expert who confirmed at least 3 points of forensic deviation indicating forgery. The judge raised an eyebrow and leaned forward to examine the page. You have this report? Included in the file, Jade said, along with a digital affidavit from the analyst. Brandon's attorney stood. Objection. We have not had sufficient time to review these documents. The evidence was submitted to the clerk within the 48-hour window, Jade replied coolly. All protocol was followed. The judge turned to the clerk, who nodded. Objection overruled, she said, sliding the file toward her. Brandon shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the armrest. Melissa's face had gone pale. She looked smaller now, the lipstick suddenly garish under the fluorescent lights. Exhibit C, Jade continued, is a postnuptial agreement signed in 2018 following a period of marital counseling. Clause 9 clearly states that in the event of extramarital conduct by Mr. Carter, all shared property, including the home, reverts to Mrs. Carter's control. She passed a copy forward. Brandon surged to his feet. That agreement was symbolic, he snapped. It wasn't even notarized. Actually, Jade said calmly, it was. Page 2, bottom right corner, notary stamp and signature. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Carter, please sit down. Brandon sank back into his chair, breathing hard through his nose. Naomi didn't blink. She watched him crumble in increments. The judge scanned the document, then looked up. Do you deny that this is your signature? Brandon hesitated. No, but that's enough, the judge said, voice sharp. Motion to vacate is denied. All active marital accounts are to be frozen pending further investigation. Temporary property control is awarded to Mrs. Carter. Brandon's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Jade wasn't finished. Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness. Miss Talia Carter. Naomi's heart thudded once hard. She turned slightly as her daughter stood from the back of the courtroom, walking slowly toward the witness box. Talia looked smaller than usual, her braid slightly messy, her hands tucked into her sleeves. The bailiff administered the oath. Talia nodded. Yes, I swear. Talia, Jade said gently, can you tell the court what you saw on October 7th after your dance class? Talia glanced at her mother, then at her father. Brandon stared back at her with something between command and fear. I saw my dad picking up Miss Beckett, she said quietly. They kissed. She got in his car. I was supposed to go to tutoring, but I saw them before I left. Did your father say anything to you afterward? Talia nodded slowly. He told me not to say anything, that it would ruin everything, that it was better this way. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Her daughter's voice cracked on the last word, but she kept going. Jade nodded. Thank you, Talia. That's all. The judge looked back down at the file. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone a steel blade, "you have manipulated financial assets, violated the terms of a post-nuptial agreement, and involved your child in your deception. This court finds your conduct not only unethical, but potentially criminal." Brandon opened his mouth. "I suggest," the judge said, cutting him off, "that you find better legal representation before we reconvene for the final hearing, and that you explain to your new partner the legal risks of collusion in financial misconduct." Melissa stood abruptly. "I didn't—" "Sit down," the judge ordered. She did, slowly. Naomi's fingers curled around the edge of the table. Her breathing had slowed. Her heartbeat didn't race. She had come here not to win, but to expose, to lay bare the truth in rooms that didn't care about emotion but did respect evidence. Now she had both. When the gavel came down, it didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like the turning of a key, a door opening, a weight lifted. Naomi stood. She glanced at Brandon. For a second, just one, he looked like a boy who had been caught with a stolen toy. She said nothing, walked past him, out to the courtroom, into the waiting sun. The first thing Naomi Carter noticed when she walked back into the house alone was the quiet. Not the kind of quiet that made her nervous or reminded her of what had been lost, but a deeper quiet, one that felt earned. No Brandon's shoes by the front door, no scent of his cologne lingering on the hallway air, no background sports commentary humming from the TV like a second pulse. The house was hers now. Not yet legally, those papers would come, but spiritually, completely. The silence didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like space. Naomi walked through the entryway and set her keys on the table, the one she had sanded and varnished herself 4 summers ago while Brandon was away on a networking retreat. The wood caught the light, rich and warm. She touched it gently, then stepped out of her shoes. Her bare feet met the polished floor like it was greeting her back. In the kitchen, the sun was falling in from the windows, long amber streaks striping across the floor like slow-moving gold. Naomi didn't sit. She just stood in it. Let the warmth soak her shoulders, her arms, her face. It was the first time she had stood in this kitchen without wondering if someone would walk in and take something from her. That evening, the kids returned from her sister's house. Eli ran straight into her arms. Talia paused at the doorway, uncertainty clouding her features. Naomi opened her arms again without saying a word. This time, her daughter walked forward. They stood there for a long while, not speaking. They didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't immediate, but love was still present. That was enough. The days that followed weren't magic, but they were manageable. The house stopped feeling haunted. Talia started coming downstairs for dinner again. Eli slept through the night without waking. Naomi began cooking again, not elaborate meals, just enough to remind the kids that rhythm hadn't disappeared. They watched sitcoms on the old couch with the lumpy cushion, laughing sometimes out of habit, sometimes out of truth, and Naomi, with a quiet fire, rebuilt. Word had spread quickly after the courtroom hearing, not just in whispers between friends but online. A woman who had taken on her husband and his mistress and their web of lies and walked out with her dignity and eventually her home intact. Her Instagram inbox flooded. Messages from strangers, former clients, women in similar battles. One message stood out. A local lifestyle producer wanted to feature her for a segment on women transforming adversity into power. Naomi hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to be that woman, But then she thought of every moment Brandon had rolled his eyes when she talked about her design work, every time he called her cute when she spoke about client pitches or layout plans. She emailed back, "I'd be honored." The crew came on a Thursday morning, quiet and polite. Naomi walked them through her process in her own kitchen. She spoke about color theory, about spatial energy, about making a home feel like safety, not performance. She mentioned how this kitchen, yes, this one was where she relearned herself. "This is where I rebuilt," she said, looking straight into the camera. "First furniture, then a family." The clip went viral. Not sensational viral, empowerment viral, quiet revolution viral. Her business boomed. Clients came, then referrals, then an offer to collaborate on a home makeover series with a well-known brand. Naomi didn't cry. She got to work. 2 months later, during settlement negotiations, Brandon's attorney reached out. His client needed liquidity. His firm had suspended him during a formal review. Conduct unbecoming. Naomi didn't gloat. She negotiated. The house went up for sale. She bought it herself. The price? $1, plus settlement of all pending liabilities. She wrote the check with a steady hand, the same hand that had once trembled over a pie knife. She signed the deed without ceremony, without a single extra flourish. Justice didn't need sparkle. Melissa, stripped of her role at the dance studio due to complaints from other parents and whispers about impropriety, had moved with Brandon to a small rental across town. The house was too much for him to maintain. His network had gone quiet. Naomi didn't ask around. She didn't need updates. She had her own life to manage. When Thanksgiving came again, the house felt different. The table was smaller this time, on purpose. Fewer chairs, more space. The air wasn't filled with pretense, just warmth. Her parents came. Her sister brought dessert. Eli set the table. Talia helped with the green beans, no headphones, no side glances. At some point, someone raised a glass. There were no toasts this year, no speeches, just clinks, and no one smiles. Naomi had made simpler food, nothing extravagant. She didn't need the food to carry the weight of keeping the peace. She didn't need to overcompensate anymore. After dessert, Talia disappeared upstairs. Naomi thought nothing of it, until her daughter returned with a small wrapped frame. "I saw this and thought of you," she said, placing it in her mother's lap. Naomi unwrapped it slowly. It was the article from the lifestyle segment designing her own future. One woman's quiet revolution, mounted in gold, framed against cream linen. Naomi stared at it. Her throat tightened. She looked up at Talia, who was pretending not to watch, biting her lip in that old habit from when she was 5 and worried her mother wouldn't like a drawing. "You framed this?" Naomi asked. Talia nodded. "You earned it." Naomi looked around the table, at Eli buttering a roll, at her parents mid-conversation, at the home she had reclaimed, not just with lawyers and evidence, but with intention and grit. She lifted her glass. "No speeches," she said, softly. "Just this." She glanced again at the frame beside her plate. "To beginnings." The glasses rose. Soft clinks followed. Naomi took a sip, then set her glass down. The table didn't shimmer like the year before. It wasn't extravagant, but it was honest. At the end of the night, after the dishes were washed and the leftovers stored, Naomi stood by the window. The wind tugged at the curtains, playful but gentle. She watched the backyard sway. Her hand rested lightly on the frame that now sat on the counter. It wasn't pride she felt. It was something quieter, something more powerful, peace, the kind that didn't beg to be noticed, the kind that came after choosing yourself over and over until it stuck. She didn't need anyone to toast to her. She had toasted to herself, and this time it was enough.